Welcome back, everyone, to the what's the name of our show?
Overleveled
Podcast. Welcome, everyone, to the Overleveled Podcast.
Yes, sir.
Oh man, how you been, DJ? It's been it hasn't even been a full week since we last recorded an episode, or maybe it has.
Unfortunately, no, I was playing. I've been all right. Just same old, same old. What about you? How have you been lately?
Well, like I just said to you, I just ordered myself a brand new semi-custom built computer. So, yeah, just kind of waiting on that to come. But yeah, other than that, just working like a mofo.
As mofos do.
Yeah, so today on the show, me and you are going to be just kind of doing a deep dive sort of discussion on the very first Final Fantasy game. I feel like if this game didn't exist, we wouldn't be like, I guess we wouldn't even have a lot of the games that we do love today,
That's true.
Yeah.
I feel like, I still would be interested in a lot of video games, but I feel like Final Fantasy definitely helped pave the way for my love of JRPGs.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Because I don't even think... the first game that I ever played and loved and got me into loving video games was SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. I really doubt that Final Fantasy had huge influence on that game,
Oh, no.
Yeah. But, a lot of the games that we love today, sure, we had, like, Dragon Quest that came out even before this. But yeah, this is a big one. Oh, one thing, too, just to kind of give a little bit of behind the scenes, just some insight onto what I'm kind of working on for the channel that is not the podcast and is not the one reaction video that we did to the first episode of The World Ends With You. Basically, right now, I'm doing kind of just a personal rant kind of type video for the game Fantasian.
Really?
Yeah, I've kind of recorded it, and now I'm just kind of throwing it together in Premiere Pro just to see what I can kind of do with it, if I can make it kind of funny or entertaining or informative or whatever. Like, I just
right.
I got some feelings about this game.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they more in the negative realm of feelings?
Well, I haven't played the game. A lot of my frustrations come from the fact that I want to play this game so bad, but I cannot play it,
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a 2-hour rant of me being like, I can't play this game.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Also, right now, me and DJ are doing this via cell phone call because for some reason... DJ is getting my audio, and I can watch videos and stuff on my computer and hear my own voice through my computer, but for some reason, even though his mic is set up and everything, I can't hear his mic. So I think this is still going to work out fine. We just sound like...
y'all will still hear us just fine, but...
Yeah, we just sound like shit to each other.
Yeah.
That's fine.
But fuck us.
Yeah, fuck us.
It's for y'all.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Final Fantasy, man. This very first game.
The very first one.
Yeah.
The one that paved the way.
It did, yeah. So this game came out in the year 1987, bro.
Damn, we weren't even born.
We weren't even, dude. I was not even in my dad's nutsack yet, dude.
I know.
Yeah.
Scary to think about.
I know. So it was made by Hironobu Sakaguchi is the director, the creative writer of this game. He obviously had a team of people behind him, but whenever people hear Final Fantasy and directors, they think Hironobu Sakaguchi. Along with him, probably the second biggest name attached to this project is Nobuo Uematsu.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah. So, and it, like we talked about in our video game music episode, Nobuo Uematsu has had a track record for, making some of the best fucking songs in video game in general,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are kind of the big two names, and this was developed by Square, or like it was, I guess, produced and developed by a company called Square.
No Enix back then.
Yeah, no Enix. Yeah, or were they Squaresoft? I can't remember. Were they Square, then Squaresoft, then Square Enix?
I believe so, yes. I believe that was how it went.
Cool. Yeah, so this was Square. But yeah, this game has kind of a history behind it. I think one of the biggest like rumors and or I guess I don't know if it's technically a rumor, more so as it's like the folklore of how this game was created was like, Hironobu Sakaguchi was on his last legs and they had one last chance to make a game, and he made this game and it was his final fantasy, so he called it that, and so I think I'm not I don't think that that's totally accurate. I think that's kind of been debunked somehow. I don't know the full complete story. But I do know that, this guy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, obviously loved to play a lot of games in this vein, such as shit like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've played Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yep. That's actually what I was doing last Discord call that I was telling you about. Was with James, we're setting up a new Dungeons and Dragons game.
Nice. Yeah, dude, I've actually been listening to a Dungeons and Dragons podcast a lot, so
Dungeons and Dragons podcast.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of The Adventure Zone?
No, I've not. No.
I know I've told you about the podcast My Brother and Me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the three of them and their dad, they have another podcast that they started like in 2014 or 2015 called The Adventure Zone, and it's so good. They've even spawned like graphic novels.
Tight.
Yeah, that
awesome.
that go over all their arcs and stuff. And I'm like right at the end of their first like major story. And dude, I got emotional today listening to it. Like I'm invested in these fictional funny ass characters.
That's awesome.
Anyways, so I was also just kind of doing a lot of thinking about the very first Final Fantasy game, and with me listening to this Dungeons and Dragons podcast, and it's just become so overly apparent to me that games of this nature really were very heavily influenced by Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I think we'll go more into the story here in a little bit, and the gameplay and all that sort of stuff. But even in the very beginning, like if you start a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, the first thing that you do is you kind of select what your character is going to be, and then you give them a name. And you're thrown into this adventure with just a little bit of information as to where you are and what you're doing. And you talk to some people, and then you start your first like thing, Yep.
And thankfully, it's way more simpler than how it actually is to start a D&D game. Because holy shit!
Oh yeah, dude. It's like I think the more accurate video game portrayal to how you start a D&D game is more like Dark Souls, where you spend 2.5 fucking hours just creating your character. Right. It's like. So much goes into character creation. But the very first Final Fantasy game really, as much as Final Fantasy has opened up in the future, especially with shit like 14 and 11, this very first game really did just kind of say, hey, here is this fantasy world, and you have... I think, what was it, like 6? You had like 6 options for what you can make your 4 characters. Do you remember them off the top of your head? I believe it was warrior, fighter, Black Mage, White Mage, Red Mage, and Monk? Or was Monk and Fighter the same thing?
Monk and Fighter is the same thing. It's Thief.
Oh, Thief. You're right. Okay, cool. Thief.
Those are all the 6 basic classes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, if you start a Dungeons & Dragons campaign, you're going to have more than just those 6. But
that's the basics,
Yeah, at the time, they really were they wanted to just tell you this story and let you experience this world and learn about this battle system and stuff. And so they gave you these 6 options, and you had 4 character slots. And they just kind of put you in there, and then it was kind of like the very first, I guess, really popular version of a D&D like experience that is just video game,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about that lately. Just like a lot of games and even some anime just give me a lot of D&D vibes with like, a party of 4 going in a dungeon and exploring this world with all these monsters and shit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm starting to get a lot more D&D vibes with just a lot of video games, especially classical JRPGs.
Yeah. So this game, Final Fantasy, before we get into the story and stuff, this game has been remade and re-released a lot. I think like
not as much as 10, but quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I should have went and grabbed my Final Fantasy Ultimania thing so I can cite off of that. But I think there's something like 20 something, like 21, 22 re-releases of this game.
Really?
Yeah,
22.
Like there's so many, like it came out on the NES, and then I think the next,
right.
Later on it was like on the Wonder Swan and on PCs and stuff like that. But then I think the first prominent port/remake of it was the Final Fantasy Origins on PlayStation 1. Yeah, so that was the very first taste of like the updated visuals that we'd get for Final Fantasy 1 and 2.
Right.
So we got those, and after that, the Dawn of Souls remake came out, and now I think the most recent ports visually that we have are like the PSP and mobile device versions, which I would say are, I mean, if you're someone who's partial to the console that you first played it on, that's fine. But I would say that the like the 20th anniversary editions for PSP and stuff are I think they're objectively the best versions of those games that you could play.
They definitely look the prettiest.
They look well, and they include more dungeons and a little bit more story, and and like you were saying, visually, definitely. And you've played and beaten Final Fantasy 1 to completion, right?
Yeah, many years ago I did, yes.
Yeah. Do you? Sorry, continue.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I was doing that when they announced Final Fantasy 15, trying to beat as many Final Fantasy games at the time as I could.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was a while.
Yeah.
So, which version of that one did you play?
The GBA version.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. That was the same version that I played.
Tight.
Yeah. Overall, just kind of like, was that was not the first Final Fantasy game that you played with, though, right?
No, that was not the very first one I've ever played in my entire life. No. The very first one I ever played was 4.
Which other ones had you played before you got to that one?
5 and 6 and I think and 10, I believe. No, I played 1 before 10. I think 5 and 6. I play a lot of the GBA ones, so I think I played 5 and 6 before I touched 1. But I barely touched those games as a kid. Gotcha.
Okay, cool. So you played 4, 5, and 6, and then 1. Yeah. So, I know 4 and 6 are definitely up there as far as like the story compartment goes. So like, whenever you kind of got a taste for what those Final Fantasy games were like. What were just kind of your general thoughts whenever you finally got to the very first one in the series?
You mean like when I very first played it?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like, were you impressed at all, or were you...
I don't remember. I was just having a good time.
Yeah.
I was a kid. I don't think that deeply about video games as a kid.
Sure, yeah.
Like, oh, this is fun.
All the grinding is just fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean...
yeah, just the gameplay and I think what probably hooked me was just the atmosphere of it. It just felt different from a lot of the other types of video games out there. I was like, oh, this is new. This is different. I like this.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy 1, I know we've talked about this before, but yeah, it was the first Final Fantasy game that I played. So even though I had heard from other sources and all over the internet about how good a lot of the other Final Fantasy games, especially 7, it was like, I think my hopes were high for the series as a whole. So I remember just playing Kingdom Hearts 1 and loving that. And I just remember playing through all of the very first Final Fantasy game, feeling like even if I didn't really think I was actually experiencing something extremely fun and innovative, in my mind, I was just excited at the fact that I was finally playing a Final Fantasy game. And then, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. I was just excited about the fact that it was Final Fantasy and everyone talks about this and I'm finally playing it. And, yeah, and I don't know, looking back on it now, I don't know if I would recommend starting with the very first Final Fantasy game. I mean, if you say to yourself out there that you can play through every single one of them, sure, you might as well just start from the beginning and just play till you get to the most recent one. But they definitely, this game in particular is really, especially nowadays, this game is more so of a like a history project,
Right.
Like it's just like this piece of history that we can look back on and just love and respect for what it is, and not really, or I guess love and respect for like what it did for the franchise and stuff, and just, I don't know, just feel somewhat lukewarm about it as far as what it is today. But that, for me, that by no means makes me feel like this game is bad at all. Like I still find enjoyment from playing this video game even today. At the very beginning of the game, it opens up with, at least if you're playing... Do you remember how the Game Boy Advance one started? Did it start off with like that cutscene?
I think it had a cutscene. Yeah, like a small cutscene, just like pretty much describing what's happening to the world now that the 4 crystals are gone, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Somehow
it's like the earth is all fucked up, the water's raging.
Yeah, somehow the wind has stopped, but the waters are raging.
Yeah, I was like, wow.
Yeah. I think really that just has to do with they're really just setting up with just how twisted this world has become without the crystals.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a typo or anything,
No.
Yeah. Like I think they would make the point a little bit more clear if they had said like, the wind has stopped, but the waves are still raging or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that.
But would have made it better.
Anyways, that's not even a little bit important. Pretty
I don't
much,
know, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Time to cancel this game for being stupid. So yeah, they just kind of open up with saying, "Hey, the 4 crystals, they ain't working no more," or were they
and you got to fix that shit.
Yeah,
pretty much. It's like they ain't working no more. the four warriors of light gotta come together and save the world.
Yeah.
And then poof.
Boom. There you go. So, yeah, and then you're pretty much, like, just thrown into the world.
Yeah, no, after that cutscene, it immediately starts with you creating your characters, choosing the names of your characters, what job classes they're going to be, and then bam, like as soon as you figure it all out, you're like immediately in front of the first kingdom or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you're just right there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I guess speaking of just kind of the job classes, for me personally, pretty much every single time that I start this game, I have it set up like this, where I have the warrior up front, and then I have the red mage underneath him.
Oh wow! Okay.
And then I have white mage and black mage. And the reason why...
Oh, no thief.
Yeah, I mean, I want the offensive magic user as well as the defensive magic user. Mm-hmm. And then, the warrior is he's your big hitter, and he's got
he's the big boy.
Strong hits. And the red mage, he's a jack of all of those. Like, he's pretty much all three of them combined. Like, he can use melee weapons and can cast black magic and white magic. So I wasn't always too interested in trying out the thief or the monk characters. But, I don't know if there's any more tactile advantage on bosses and stuff with the other ones, but
there probably is, but who cares?
How did you set up your party?
Exactly how it's set up when you first open the game. Just warrior, thief, white mage, black mage. I don't change anything, nothing.
Nice.
I've never tried red mage, never tried monk. Just keep it.
Really?
vanilla.
Oh, right on. Right on. Not too shabby.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're thrown in. Oh, and before we even go into the story, bro, we have to just while we talk about this, I'm going to be kind of playing it's just some of the music that we hear in the while it's all happening and stuff. Just because the music in this game is so influential to just how they continue to do the music in the Final Fantasy games going forward.
Right.
Whenever they, at least in the NES version, I can't remember if they do this in the remake, but they kind of do that whole thing where they have the text going down the screen, and it's that same story of the Earth is all fucked up. Now we need the four heroes of light or whatever, four warriors of light to come and reclaim the crystals or whatever.
Right.
And in the background, they have the prelude. And this is the very first time that we see the prelude in the whole series. It's in the very first game. And then this game has made that prelude so synonymous with the name Final Fantasy. People now think Final Fantasy, and one of the couple of songs that they think of is the do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, just that scale going up and down. And we get the bare bones version of it. It's just that song. So after the prelude, you're thrown into just kind of that first area. You're not really in the town, and you're not really in the castle. You're just kind of right there on the map. And if you go up a few squares, you go into the castle. If you go left or right, you go into the village.
Yep.
Yeah, so whenever you go into this castle, this is actually where it gets interesting, because the king tells you, the four warriors of light, that your very first thing that you have to do is save the princess. Now, this is very interesting because for most games, that's the last thing that you do.
Yeah.
That's
Mario.
Yeah, like Mario or Zelda. It's for most stories of this nature, even in like cartoons, like if you look at Disney movies and stuff like that, pretty much you save the day whenever you rescue the princess, and then it's like happily ever after, and then the credits roll. But the very first thing that you do is you go to a place called the Chaos Shrine, which sounds like the last fucking level to a video game, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that's the first thing that you do is you go into the Chaos Shrine, and you beat this guy named, was this Garland? Yeah, Garland. You fight Garland, and you save the princess. And then you bring her back to the castle, and they celebrate, and then they build this bridge, but then, before the conversation's over, they say, hey, dude, this is just the beginning of your journey. And it's just so interesting to me, like, looking at it from this perspective of, you know, this is not how traditional stories are told, you know? Usually there's a build-up before you reach the, you know, you go to the princess and stuff. And so, with that little piece of information that we get at the beginning of the game, with the way that the world is, and then the very first thing that we do is we go to the castle and we talk to the king, and he tells us to save the princess. We go and we fight the guy who kidnapped her, and now we have saved the princess. From there, it's like, what? Okay, where do you go from there? And you know, and it's very cool to see how this game has later on continued to influence other Final Fantasy games in the future. I feel like one of the big reasons why me and you and other people just around the world continue to love Final Fantasy is because of this very specific thing that they do in the first game, and that is they find a way to break conventions of other storytelling, and they just like figure out a new way to tell a story and grip you with something new every time, which is like such an amazing thing that Final Fantasy has always done, you know? Final Fantasy 2, the very first thing that you do is die. Like, like you see a little cutscene of your town being raided or whatever, and then you have your party of 4 that you don't get to name like you did in the first game, and then you're like captured by this army, and then they kill you, and then it's like, you know, if you played Final Fantasy 1, you're expecting the game over screen, and you think, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. Like, they grip you in by doing something interesting like that. Final Fantasy 3, the very first thing that you do is you wake up in the middle of a dungeon, and there's just goblins all around you. You find a sword inside of a chest, a la Legend of Zelda or something, and then you try to escape the dungeon. Final Fantasy 4, you're literally opening up the game as, like, you know, in your head you're like a villain, you know? You know, Final Fantasy 6, like, you are also kind of being captured by these villains. Final Fantasy 7, like, you're playing as a terrorist in the beginning of the game. Just like they always find these really interesting ways to drop you into this world that they've designed, and you know, they just figure out a way to break whatever is conventional about storytelling. And then they throw in a bunch of plot twists, like, everywhere. We haven't even talked about the 2,000-year time loop?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's very what the fuck.
Yeah, easily the most confusing part about this whole video game. But, yeah, Final Fantasy 1. Whenever you kill Garland in the very beginning, he basically is like, oh, I'll be back or whatever. I forget what he says.
Something like that.
But you know, later on down the line, you realize that you're stuck here in this 2,000-year time loop or whatever.
Right.
it all gets kind of interesting and convoluted from there.
But you really don't really learn that until you meet him again.
Exactly, right.
It's just like, here's an exposition dump.
Yeah. So, after you save Princess Cornelia, or is it Corneria? I think depending on what version of the game, it's Cornelia or Corneria. Mm-hmm. You leave the castle. The king has prepared a bridge for you, and now this world has become pretty much completely open.
And I've realized that's actually pretty much the prologue of the game, because once you cross the bridge is when the title card comes, and just like the text of just like explaining what the plot is and what the words are going to do starts playing, and then they have like the music playing, like da, 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 da. They have all of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then that brings me kind of to this second point, or the second song that I was gonna mention. This is first of all, for the NES especially, this is beautiful. This artwork of them standing on this like hillside. You see these 4 characters, and you just see the like their dark silhouettes, and you see these birds flying in the background, and what looks to be either a field or an ocean or something out before them, and a castle. And then it just says Final Fantasy, and it says, and so their journey begins.
Yeah.
And it's super badass, It
is very badass. I agree.
Yeah, and so it opens up with that. It says, and so their journey begins. What awaits the 4? They do not know. Each holding a crystal that 2,000 years ago shined with beauty from within, but now only darkness. And this is like the NES version that I'm seeing, but it's like, come, start your journey. Return the light of peace to our world. And yeah, that's that, it's the whole like in Kingdom Hearts 1, you do the whole thing where you're inside of the dream world or whatever, and you're fighting the Shadow Heartless, and you wake up on Destiny Islands, and all of this is right after you're so confused as to what's happening, and then it's like, boom, Kingdom Hearts 1. Or sorry, maybe Kingdom Hearts 2 is a better example, because it's like you play through like 3 hours of this guy named Roxas, and then finally, whenever your journey starts, 3 hours later, it's like Kingdom Hearts 2. Like, the title finally comes. And that's kind of what's going on right here,
But much shorter.
much shorter, but also, I think really well done.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
Like how we were saying earlier with just how you're dropped into the game. Like, all of that is very fast, but you don't have to go into the castle first thing. You don't have to go into the towns first thing. If you wanted to, you can go get your ass handed to by some goblins. Like,
hell yeah.
Like, that can be the first thing that you do if you want. Like, once this game starts, you're in it. You choose your characters, you give them your names or whatever, and then boom, you're in the game.
Sir.
And it's
waste no time.
Yeah, it's very interesting how they have this done, and they even tell you a little story. Like, sure, it's generic. Maybe even for the time it was generic, but this idea of the princess has been kidnapped. There's a castle north of here on this same little island or whatever. Go over there. She's been kidnapped by this guy named Garland. Please, like, you have to rescue her. And then you fight monsters on the way over there, and then you get over there to the castle, and then he's like, it's me, Garland, or whatever. I'm gonna knock all of you down or whatever. And then you beat his ass, and then there's like a little scene that plays or whatever, and then you get Garland, or you get Cornelia, and then you're thanked and you learn more about this kingdom or whatever, and then they build you a bridge, and it's like, hey, you're playing Final Fantasy. Here is where your journey begins. That really was the prologue. Like,
yeah,
it's just setting
plus,
things
even what
up.
you were saying earlier about like how usually in video games that's like the ending, and it's like, that's true now that I think about it. Like, a lot of games back then, like, that's the last thing you do, and in Final Fantasy 1, that's the first thing you do.
Yes,
that's crazy
exactly.
to think about, actually.
Yeah, and it's just so cool because you're just like, okay, well then what the fuck is next? How does this end?
Right.
Where does the story end if I've already done the noble thing that warriors do, save the princess?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, where do we go from there? And
where's Bowser?
Yeah, so, you know, right after that, you have a lot of options of what you can do right afterwards, but I think you can go to Matoya's cave right afterwards. If it's not Matoya's cave, it's the pirate place, the pirate.
It's the pirate place.
Yeah, so the pirate place is really interesting because this is also another really cool thing that I realized started in Final Fantasy 1. Pirates. I mean, sure, pirates are a thing of other Final Fantasy games and other like pop culture in general, and they were around a long time ago, I guess. But you know, this is like a whole village full of pirates, and that's really cool. Yeah. You know, other than like Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, and maybe some other Final Fantasy games, like I can't ever think of other games that are pirate centric.
That's true.
Sure, maybe not Subnautica. What is it? You know, there's like some cool games nowadays, but not a whole lot of pirates. Especially in a big fantasy world like this, where you know you got black mages and red mages and white mages and ninjas and shit like that.
About that.
You know, it's like, okay, pirates, cool.
Hey,
I'm down. I'm down with pirates.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah, this is like this village full of pirates, and then you beat some pirate ass, and I think from there, I really should have done some more research on just
what happens is after you beat the pirates, the dude's just like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here, as thanks for not killing me, I'll give you my ship. You could do whatever you want with it. So
there
then
you go.
You have your own ship.
Boom. Yeah, you get your first.
Don't need Sid for shit.
Yeah, you get your first ship. It's
and
like
then it's Matoya's cave. Next.
Yeah, it's the very first mode of transportation that you get. That's not walking around. Mm-hmm. Later on, you get shit like the airship and stuff. Where did you? Because you said you recently played it for a couple of hours. Where did you stop, like plot wise?
I stopped going after the first crystal, the Earth crystal.
Okay, cool. So you fought the Lich, right?
No, I haven't fought him yet. No.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing the stuff to get to him.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So there's another concept of the story that is just involving these 4 fiends, which is another thing that other Final Fantasy games in the future have gone back and explored some more. Like Final Fantasy IX is the first thing that I think of, where literally before you fight some of the last bosses in this game, you have to go through the 4 fiends, and I'm pretty sure they're all the same as in the very first Final Fantasy game.
And what's actually interesting that I think is really cool is that like you actually sort of in a way already meet one of the first 4 fiends very early on in the game. Like there's a cave within the very first area of the game, and if you go inside it, you see a statue of the Lich.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And I know that those statues become relevant like way later in the game, but I can't remember exactly what happens with those statues.
I'm kind of reading through a little bit of just like what Wikipedia has on just like its big story beats. I know so right here it says, you know, after visiting the near ruined town of Melmond, the Warriors of Light go to the Earth Cave and defeat a vampire to retrieve the Star Ruby, which gains passage to Sage Sada's cave. With Sada's rod, the warriors venture deeper into the Earth Cave and destroy the Earth Fiend Lich. The Warriors of Light then obtain a canoe and enter the Gurgu volcano and defeat the Fire Fiend Carrie. The Levistone from the nearby ice cave allows them to raise an airship to reach the northern continents. And they prove their courage by retrieving the rat's tail from the castle of Ordeal. The king of dragons, Bahamut, promotes each light warrior. So this is another amazing thing. This is seriously this is probably where I got whenever I was first playing the game that made me really in love with what I was doing. And I didn't want to stop, and I just didn't want to stop seeing where the story was going, you know? Mm-hmm. And this is basically that big Cecil moment from Final Fantasy IV, where you get you know, you go from being a dark knight to a paladin. It's the big class change moment, and then not only is it just, oh, your class has changed, you have new abilities, like you literally watch all of your party members evolve like Pokemon pretty much. Yeah. You know, and it looks so cool.
It does look cool.
Even on like the NES version, it looked pretty badass.
Oh, definitely.
But yeah, even with these updated visuals, though, even though it's like these games have obviously gotten to look better over time, like just seeing this change, like from, hey, you were these tiny little sprites, now you're a couple pixels bigger, and if you're like a white mage, like you just completely take off your hood and stuff. Like, I don't know.
It's fucking cool. Yeah, and I like it how the more physical classes, like when they advance, they actually can learn some spells. Like the knight and the ninja, the knight can learn some white spells, like the lower level ones, and the ninja can learn some low level black mage spells, which is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, and so you get the upgrade from Bahamut, and this is also interesting too because you see Bahamut for the first time, and very few times. This might be the only time, but Bahamut is just an NPC in this game.
Yeah.
He's not an enemy or a summon or anything like that. He's just the king of the dragons, Bahamut.
Yep.
So, you know, and he is just laying down nothing but groundwork and foundation for where they're going to go in the future with these games and characters and stuff. Obviously, I mean, Bahamut wasn't created by Hironobu Sakaguchi or anything. And things like the Lich and stuff and the Fire Fiend Carrie, like all of these come from, you know, other cultures and mythologies and stuff like that. And they've all continued to meld and shape sort of what Final Fantasy is in the future. And it's really cool to just see all of that inclusion and just seeing how they shape all of these different backgrounds and histories and mythologies and religions, and they just shape them into just like this one fantasy epic. So,
right.
Bahamut promotes each warrior of light. A kind gesture is repaid by a fairy receiving special liquid that produces oxygen, and the warriors use it to help them defeat the water fiend, Kraken.
Oh.
And the Sunken Shrine. They also receive a slab, which allows a linguist named Dr. Une to teach them the, what is this? The Lefinish language? The Lefinish give the Light Warriors, or the Warriors of Light, access to the floating castle that Tiamat, the Wind Fiend, has taken over. With the four fiends defeated and the crystals restored, a portal opens in the Temple of Fiends, aka the Temple, or the Chaos Shrine, which takes them 2,000 years into the past, where the Warriors of Light discover that the four fiends had sent Garland back in time, and he sent the fiends to the future to do so, creating a time loop which he could live forever. The Warriors of Light defeat Chaos, thus ending the paradox and return home. By ending the paradox, however, the Warriors of Light have changed the future to one where their heroic deeds remain unknown outside of legend. This is very interesting because this can tie into so many different theories that people have just about Final Fantasy in general and interconnected stories. And this story, Final Fantasy 1, pretty much by the end of this story, you realize that this really is but a legend that no one will ever know happened. Because, this thing has been happening for 2,000 years or whatever. And so because they went into the past to make sure that the chaos was never happening, no one ever experienced any chaos happening anywhere, ever. So this is only a deed that these 4 warriors have done. And it's very interesting because you have to, then you're thinking, well, how did they get there? How, is there anyone else who remembers this? Or was it just them? And it's this very interesting thing.
Yeah, those types of stories kind of make me a little sad. Those stories are just the heroes do all this stuff, but nobody will ever know of all the great deeds that they did. It's man, that's unfortunate.
But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. There's little character details here and there.
100%. We should have prefaced that earlier. Final Fantasy 1 is not a story-driven game. It's not a story.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you can summarize this whole game in just about 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, but I think at the time, I mean, maybe at the time that was a big thing. Its story. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think a lot of games back then really had much of a story to begin with.
So kind of. Oh, and one other song that I also wanted to mention. There's actually 2 songs, but one song that I'll say first. In my opinion, I fucking love Matoya's Cave theme song. I will play, probably either I'll play a mixture. I'll kind of play a little bit of the NES version right here, and then right after that I'll kind of play a remastered orchestrated version of that song here, just to kind of show the viewers what I'm talking about with this song. But yeah, the song is really, really good. It's so good just to see Nobuo Uematsu just in these beginning stages, just pushing out good music from the start. At least in my
real quick, speaking of Matoya's Cave, I was just looking it up on YouTube, and apparently Matoya is in Final Fantasy 14's story.
Yeah,
I did not expect that at all. I was like, oh shit, okay.
She's also in Final Fantasy 9. She's mentioned in one of the items that you get.
Oh.
Final Fantasy 9 really kind of is just this big hodgepodge of every Final Fantasy game before it. Full of references here and there. But maybe that's another podcast that we can discuss in the future. There really are lots of connections between Final Fantasy games, and I really do believe there is a canon timeline to these games. Final Fantasy 2 and 4 are definitely connected, 100%. Yes,
really?
Absolutely. We can talk about that later, but anyways, this next song this is kind of one of those 3 songs that I was talking about. And then after this, we can sort of go into more mechanics of the game. But the next song that is so synonymous with Final Fantasy is the battle theme song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. It started here, and it has only evolved further and further. I think nowadays it's like it's pretty much totally different than than what the first like 6 games were, you know?
Definitely.
But what has always stayed constant, even in fucking Final Fantasy 15 with Prompto,
Gotta have it.
dude, you gotta have that victory fanfare. Yeah, so the fanfare, that's another one. Started here, and I don't see that one ever going away.
It better not. I swear to God, if Final Fantasy 16 does not have it, worst Final Fantasy game of all time.
Dude, there's a shit ton that's riding on Final Fantasy 16 right
now. Oh yeah.
Especially with just the reception that people have had about 15 and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, this game has to be good if they're going to continue to make Final Fantasy games, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it's made by the guys. It's by the guys who worked on 14, so I think it would be all right.
Yeah. That's really holding my optimism right now. But yeah, okay, so that's pretty much, you know, some of the history of the game and some of the story and some notable tracks from the game. DJ, I want you to kind of give me a little bit of a rundown of just kind of how battle works, exploring like towns and like weapons and stuff like that. Just kind of how you play the game.
All right, so pop out ears, everybody. So this is how you basically play Final Fantasy 1. So pretty much
pull out your notepads.
Yeah, pull out your notepads. This is the walkthrough. So pretty much when you choose your characters, it's important to choose your characters because each class has like their own advantages, disadvantages. So warrior, obviously they focus on attack. They have high defense and high vitality, their health. The ninja, no, not the ninja, eventually becomes a ninja. The thief, he's more on speed. So he does pretty big damage like compared to the white mage and the black mage, of course, but he more focuses on doing a lot of hits. Like, because you can hit your enemies multiple times, and the thief is the one who does the most attacks, and he's the fastest one, usually the first one that'll do an attack. And the black mage does the offensive magic and some like stat boosts, and the white mage, they're the one that heals and also some curing of status ailments like poison, stuff like that. So you gotta like choose and the red mage, they have a mixture of both black magic and white magic, and the monk, they're more just the physical beaters, just using their fists, and I think nunchucks too. I think they have that. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, nunchucks.
But you have to choose between those like 4 characters there. Usually I just do the basic 4, the warrior, ninja, black mage, white mage. You'll be fine with that. So then once you do that, you're put in this world, and usually how this game and most other traditional JRPGs works in terms of combat is random encounters where you sort of just traverse the world, just doing your own thing, and then out of nowhere, just you'll be put into this weird realm with a bunch of monsters that you have to fight. And with how traditional JRPGs works, it's turn-based combat, meaning that you can sort of select what your actions can be for each character, and then you start battling. And usually battling is done once you select your actions is based on the speed of the characters compared to the enemies too. So depending on how fast your characters are, they'll attack before your enemies attack, but if the enemies are faster than you, then they'll usually attack first.
Speaking of that, if I can interrupt for a second.
Go ahead.
Is this probably your favorite of the battle systems?
No.
Okay. Gotcha. Do you have a favorite one?
Well, I've said this in a previous podcast. I prefer more action-oriented games, and But if I was just going sort more just traditional turn-based, probably... I kind of like how eventually they implement doing... I can't remember the exact name for it, but it's sort of like... I think it's called action turn-based, where it's enemies can attack even while you're choosing what you want to do. Because it adds more...
Yeah, the active
battle system, yeah. Because it adds more sort of just like... I guess tension, because just like, fuck, I gotta figure it out. Which for some, that can be a little... I think
it's active time battle.
Active time battle, that's what it is. Which for some, that can be a little annoying, because, you know, it doesn't really give you time to focus. But I kind of enjoy that one more, but I get where people are coming from. But yeah, Final Fantasy 1 combat's fine. It's pretty basic for the most part, especially early game. It's just, when you're in battle, you have a couple options of either attack, use magic, use an item, change up your equipment, or flee. Weirdly enough, there's not, as far as I'm aware from playing the game for about 5 hours, there's no defend option. You can't choose to defend. I know in later Final Fantasy games, you can, especially 4, I know that for one for a fact, you can, and 3, you can choose to defend rather than like do an action, which is good for your white mages or black mages if you don't want to spend mana. You can like take less damage that way. But in this game, in the first game, as far as I know, you can't, which, whatever. But yeah, it's pretty much how it goes, just active time, not active time, just random encounters, battling monsters to gain experience and money. And actually, funny enough, is when you first start the game, all the characters have the exact same amount of XP. So like they all have like a certain amount of XP that they need to gain in order to level up. So when you're first starting the game, they all level up at the exact same time, but there will be, of course, times to where, you know, some characters will die that will halt their XP gaining, making the other characters level up a little bit faster, but it's not that bad. It's not like Pokemon where you have a fucking level 100 Blastoise and level 25 everything else.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that's pretty much how combat goes. It's pretty basic for the most part, nothing too difficult. And then traversing the world, you usually after you beat the prologue is you kind of just go around the world looking for towns, looking for information of what to do. Especially because the game doesn't really tell you outright what the fuck you're supposed to do, so you gotta like talk to people. And in towns, there's a bunch of different things. There's item shops, spell shops, weapon shops, armor shops, inns to like heal your characters, which costs a little bit of money. I noticed that each inn that you go to as you progress further and further in the game does get more expensive. At the very first inn that you go to, it costs 50 gil, and then the second one in the pirate shop, I believe, is like 100, and then the one in Elfheim, I believe, is also 100, I believe, but the price definitely increases. And in later games...
Yeah, I think that also, in later games, that's just kind of how the inns work.
Right. But funny enough, in 2, which, I mean, I won't talk about this, I just mentioned this real quick. In 2, how much money it costs in the inn is dependent on how much health you lost or how much mana you lost, which is weird.
What a system.
Yeah, weird system. But anyway, back to Final Fantasy 1. That's pretty much how it goes. And with each shop, you know, the weapon shop is you buy all different kinds of weapons. And luckily in the GBA version and probably the PS1 version, it lets you know right away what weapon works for which character. Because if you go to an item, you'll have certain characters like hop up being like, hey, I can use this. Which is actually like a pretty funny and good way to like notify, okay, this weapon works for this character, which is good. And also they have like little arrows. They have like a green arrow for this is a better weapon than what you currently have, and a red arrow saying this is a worse weapon than what you currently have, or a equal sign saying that they're basically the exact same thing, which is good way of like letting you know rather than just buying and hoping for the best.
And can I just say too, like, that is such a nice welcome to the re-releases of the game, just because in the NES version of the game, the system interface for just like shopping for weapons was so confusing to me.
I believe it.
Which is why I can never get past the prologue of Final Fantasy 1 on the NES.
Yeah,
it's just so confusing.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever play the original like 3 games. Maybe even the SNES. Maybe the SNES ones aren't bad, but definitely the first 3 games I could not play those in the original version. But yeah, the weapon shop, buy weapons. Armor shop, same thing, but you know, for your armor of like having better evasion and better defense. And then there's the black mage and the white mage shops. Now, this is how it goes with the first couple games, is that you have to buy magic. In later Final Fantasy games and JRPGs in general, you just learn spells by leveling up. But in the originals, you have to buy spells, and you only get 3 slots, and there's different levels of magic. So in the very first town that you visit, where you meet the king and he tells you, "Save my daughter from that asshole Garland," there's 2 different shops that each have the basic leveled magics for white mage and black mage. So the first shop, the white mage, there's cure, there's other ones besides cure. I don't remember, but yeah, and they each cost like 100. You can only have 3 for your mage who you choose, and you can't choose on the other guys who don't know that spell. You can only have 3 for that one level of magic, and each shop that you visit that has the higher levels of magic, they cost more. Like the first place that you visit, it's 100 gil. Next place that you visit, I believe, is 250, and then in Elfheim, it's like immediately shoots up to 1,000, which is insane.
Yeah.
But by that point, you start learning spells that like can either heal the entire party or do damage to all the enemies. As you're saying,
I'll say I do like the system where you earn magic by like leveling up. Mm-hmm. Like you earn fire or something, and then whenever you reach like level 16 or something, you learn like Fyra and then Fyraga or whatever. Yeah. But I will say in some games too, like Final Fantasy VII, for instance, you do have to purchase those like as materia. Mm-hmm. Like in the very beginning of the game, you purchase those, and like in Final Fantasy VIII, it's like pretty much anyone can use fire, but you have to like draw it from an enemy that has that. So it's very interesting kind of how they've jumped around the series with how you obtain magic and stuff, but purchasing magic has always been an interesting one to me.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. I mean, I guess it's kind of cool because just like you're learning a scroll from someone, like you're buying a scroll from a magic shop. But yeah, I agree. It's better to just like level up and get the spell rather than just like trying to grind for money, because a lot of times I'm not able to afford it at the moment as soon as I enter the town.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and plus leveling up is actually relatively fast in that game. It doesn't take too long to gain a couple levels, and you gain a lot of money too. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And then
especially if you emulate and use those speed up modes.
Yeah, honestly, I can't play a lot of GBA games now after doing that in regular version. Especially Pokemon. Exactly. I can't fucking play a regular version. But yeah, so and then pretty much the rest of the game is just like how we've described Dungeons and Dragons. Like you're just going in dungeons, trying to do things to help save the local town from all the crazy shit that's happened because of the loss of the 4 crystals. And yeah, eventually, like halfway, maybe more than halfway in the game, you meet Bahamut, and he gives you jobs advancements that gives you better stats, better weapons, better spells to get for your characters. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of like the gameplay. It's pretty easy, and it's the very first game, so it's not too hard. And over time with each game it gets a little bit more complex than that, but that's pretty much the basics of the gameplay of Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah. And then I guess too, since we were talking about like just travel and traversing the towns and stuff, you get the boat later on and stuff, and I think in some games you are not really affected by that, like affected by enemies, but I'm pretty sure in the first game you can still encounter enemies on the boat. They're just now like enemies that you would find out on the sea or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I believe you also get an airship, right? Yes.
Well, before the airship though, you get the canoe. Traverse around
that's true, yes.
The soft waters or whatever.
That's how you get to the volcano, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, airships and stuff.
Yeah.
Canoes, boats, airships, these are all things that, this game started that have become staples to Final Fantasy in general.
Yep. And unfortunately, 15 they had to add a fucking car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, for if you beat the game, it's also an airship. So,
but
and that is one of those things too, though, where it's like, yeah, I think if you wanted to keep people invested in the way that you traverse this world, you should have given them the airship option like way early on.
Well, I
mean,
mean,
there's
I mean, I'm fine with
There's
the
a
car.
lot of,
It's just how they turned it into an airship. I thought was just stupid. But yeah,
it's just you just gotta talk to that old fucking bitch Sid that doesn't do shit.
right.
Okay. Anyways, yeah. So we've kind of gone over an hour here, and I think this is something that we can talk about for probably a while. But all in all, like we said in the beginning, this is a really interesting piece of history more than anything. I think
Definitely.
it's fun. Like it tells an intriguing story. Like you want to know kind of where it goes whenever you start it, but it's nothing that's groundbreaking by today's standards, really. The gameplay has only continued to evolve and become better, in my opinion, just as time has gone on, and they've made new Final Fantasy games. But overall, I don't think it's the worst Final Fantasy game.
No, not at all.
No, I think it's a good game, and I personally, if you watched my ranking of the Final Fantasy games, for me, in my opinion, this game for me, as it did for the whole series, it started it all for me.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I guess you could say Kingdom Hearts started it all for me, as far as getting into Final Fantasy. But
Right, both in Final Fantasy itself.
yeah, this was the first Final Fantasy game that I played and experienced. So, I've got a lot of love and appreciation for this title, and for me personally, I think I would maybe give it like a 6.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you? Do you have an idea for what you'd give the score?
I think a 6 too. Like it's fine, but if I were to choose a Final Fantasy game to play, this would not be it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely better options out
Right,
there.
but I mean, it's the first one, so the first
Yeah,
game in a series is usually not the greatest. Which
I would say to anyone who wants to start kind of in that 2D sprite-based Final Fantasy game sphere, I would say start with 4.
God damn right.
Yeah, I'd say start with 4 if you don't want to play the sprite-based version, like the PSP version or the Game Boy version or whatever. They got a really good remake of that game for the Nintendo DS and PC and stuff like that. So that's just where I'd start. But this, I mean, hey, if you're like me and you wanted to just start from the first one, it's not the worst option.
Nope.
I'd say
But it's not your only option.
I would say there are worse places to start.
What would you say is the worst one to start with?
I think if you want to get into the series as a whole, it might be. I would not recommend starting with 15. And the only reason why I say that is because if that is the kind of game that you're into, sure, go ahead and play that one. But just know that gameplay-wise and stylistic-wise, it is the most different out of all of the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
Like, it has similarities, and it's got those tropes that are shared throughout the series. But if you want to know what Final Fantasy is, 15 is not where you start.
Yeah, that should be one of the last ones you play in terms of, like, understanding the series.
Yeah, if you just want to play for the sake of just seeing what the newest thing is, well, sure, play 7, but 15, that's where I'd start on that spectrum. But I guess I would also say, I don't know, maybe 2 is probably a really weird place to start.
Yeah. Play
I mean,
Final
the first
Fantasy 11
three
first.
are kind the first three are kind of in their own family, separate from the rest of the series, I feel like.
What about 10?
In my opinion, you don't need to play the first three ever if you don't want to.
Right.
You know? But they're also all kind of in this same boat as Final Fantasy 1, where it's like, if you just want to see where this series got its footing in the first place, you know, you see it all from there. Like, you see where they got a lot of the gameplay ideas and story ideas. Like, that's where those games lie. But anyways, pretty good game. If you're interested in playing it, I recommend it. Even though I give it a 6.5 out of 10, I don't think it's I mean, sure, you can skip it if you want to get into the rest of the series, but fuck it. I mean, if you want to play this game, play the game. It's fun. Like, it's just fun to level up your characters and stuff.
Yeah.
And grinding in this game goes fast, especially if you use emulation. It's just an all-around, like, solid RPG at its core.
I agree. Like, at the end of the day, like, all the Final Fantasy games are fun on their own, and just enjoy them. Like, doesn't matter. Honestly, it really doesn't matter which game you start off with or whatever. Just have fun. Whatever one you feel like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really is. I think for every Final Fantasy game there is, I think this is probably the best one for like pick up and go kind of play, like for a PSP or for on your phone or something, or on the Game Boy. Like, it really is just like, you pick it up, you play for a few seconds. Like, you can probably gain levels within, like, minutes, you know, just playing this game. And that shit's fun. And if you're into that sort of thing, pick up this game if you've never played it. But, yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. There are obviously plenty of gameplay tidbits and plenty of story, you know, analysis stuff that we've skipped over, and development stuff that we skipped over. But overall, this is a good game, and I recommend it. But yeah, that's our official review for the very first Final Fantasy game. We may end up doing shit like this in the future for other video games, maybe not in the Final Fantasy series. If DJ in the future wants to talk about, like, Disgaea or some shit like that, or Yu-Gi-Oh! Legend of the Duelists or whatever. Yeah, I mean, this is just something that I wanted to try. We may do it in the future. But, yeah, as always, DJ, thank you so much for joining me on this one.
Thank you for having me.
Wait, I didn't hear what you said because I had my headphones unplugged from my phone.
I said thank you for having me. It was great.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
You're welcome, man. All right, y'all take it easy out there. We will see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.